You Cannot Quit. Powerful motivational video. There was a man named Ethan, a name you'd probably never hear again if his story hadn't unfolded the way it did. He was an average guy living in a town that most people would never even notice on a map. Every day, he'd wake up at 5 a.m., start his work at a dead-end job, and return to the same lonely room. But one night, something happened. It was like the weight of all the broken dreams in his life hit him all at once. He stood at the edge of a cliff, literally and metaphorically, and thought about jumping. What stopped him? Fear was the quiet companion he'd grown accustomed to. What froze him there was something deeper, something raw, an echo from his past, a whisper that said, "You cannot quit." At that moment, Ethan saw the face of his younger self standing at the bottom of a staircase, looking up at the world beyond. He was 8 years old, filled with dreams of adventure and success. But somewhere along the way, life had convinced him to stop chasing them. He had quit, and the price of that was everything he'd lost. You'd think that would be the end of his story, but it wasn't. Because Ethan made a decision in that very instant. He chose to listen to that voice in his head, and that decision, just one moment of resistance, changed everything. What happens next? But you have to keep watching, because what Ethan did next is the reason you cannot quit either. What did he see that made him believe again? The truth was, Ethan had never truly given up. He'd just forgotten how to push forward. The years of struggle had worn him down. But in that moment, when the wind howled around him on that cliff, he remembered the world wasn't finished with him yet, and he certainly wasn't finished with it. Ethan stepped back from the edge. It wasn't a simple move, but it felt like it was. His feet left the precipice and the world didn't collapse. His heart beat faster, not from fear, but from something far deeper. Something like relief mixed with anticipation. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to feel the weight of what he'd left behind. He let it pull him in, not with guilt, but with acceptance. Yes, he had lost. Yes, he had quit. But he had also lived. And that meant he still had a chance. It wasn't the pain of failure that brought him to that moment. It was the wisdom he had earned from the years of trying. He realized quitting wasn't the end of his story. It was the beginning of something new. In the days that followed, Ethan began searching for the spark he'd lost. He went through every drawer, every notebook, every photo, and every memory from his past. And there it was. The map. The map of his lost dreams. The map of everything he had once believed he was destined for. He sat down that night in his tiny room and stared at it. The symbols on the map were familiar, but they felt distant now. The wild ambitions he had as a boy, those that had been replaced by doubts, responsibility, and routine, were staring back at him, asking, "Why did you stop?" The answer wasn't simple. Life had thrown curveballs. It had handed him failure, disappointment, and heartbreak. But what it didn't give him was an answer to the question that haunted him every day. What happens if I just keep going? That night, Ethan wrote down one simple goal. I'm going to keep going. It wasn't about success. It wasn't about winning. It was about the choice to not quit, to push through, to take that next step when everything in life said to stop. The next morning, he made a phone call he'd been avoiding for months. The conversation didn't go as expected. It was awkward. It was uncomfortable. But when the call ended, a small weight had lifted from his chest. It wasn't a huge victory, but it was a victory. He didn't stop there. For the first time, he decided that every single day would be a step toward his dreams. Even if that step was small, even if he didn't know where he was going, just one small decision to keep moving forward. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and slowly things began to change. But that's not where the real story begins. The real story started on a day when Ethan realized something crucial. His journey wasn't just about him. It was about everyone who had ever given up. It was about the people who had quit because the world told them they weren't good enough, that they didn't have what it took. Those people needed to hear his story because he wasn't any different than them. He had been there too, on the brink of giving up, just like them. And if he could keep going, so could they. Ethan began to speak, not to thousands, not to an audience, but to the person closest to him, the person who needed to hear it most. He stood in front of his mirror one night and said it aloud. You cannot quit. Not now. Not ever. That message resonated more deeply than he could have imagined. Every day, he took the lessons from his past and used them to shape his future. The obstacles didn't disappear. The struggles didn't ease up. But now, Ethan had something far more powerful than anything he had before. He had the courage to face it. He had learned that quitting wasn't an option, but neither was letting fear dictate his life. As he kept moving forward, the world began to notice. Not because Ethan had become some perfect version of success. No, he had become something even more powerful. He had become a reminder to everyone that no matter how far you fall, no matter how deep the pit feels, there's always a way out if you refuse to quit. And so Ethan's story doesn't end with some grand triumph. It ends with something more important. The realization that success isn't the absence of failure. Success is the refusal to quit, no matter the cost. There are many people who will tell you to give up, to stop chasing the impossible, to take the easy way out. They'll tell you that failure is a sign to stop trying. But the truth is far more brutal. The moment you stop trying is the moment you let go of the possibility of something better. That's when you lose. Remember what Ethan learned. He had a choice to stay where he was, stuck in a life he had outgrown, or to push through every obstacle, every failure, and keep fighting for the person he was meant to become. You have that same choice. So the question remains, what happens next? Will you quit, or will you, like Ethan, rise from the ashes of your own fears and doubts? Bespreking, leave a comment below and share the phrase that resonates most with you. And don't forget to like and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. There's someone out there who needs to know that they too cannot quit. Stay tuned, there's a story connected to this one, and trust me, it's one you'll want to hear.